Hello, everyone. Welcome and happy Thursday. We're very, very happy to have you join here for our session on conversational AI, how to create virtual assistants using Dialogflow CX. And I'm very, very happy to introduce Xavier, who goes by Xavi. He's based out of Madrid and is a head of infrastructure at VoiceFlow, also a Google Cloud Champion Innovator. He'll be doing most of the driving today, and you all are in for a treat. I met Xavi many months ago, I think at the beginning of this year, funnily enough, in our Google Developers Discord channel, and he's been great, one of many, many great people in the community to work with. So I'll introduce myself briefly, introduce the session, talk about what we're going to cover today, and then you all will get to see all kinds of awesome fundamentals about conversational AI, virtual assistants, and how you can do really cool things in Dialogflow CX. So let's get into it. I'm Chris Overholt. I'm a developer advocate based out of near Austin, Texas. And then I'm joined by Xavi again, who's based in Madrid. So we are super excited to have you all join here. So we'll jump to the next slide and I'll talk about what we're going to talk about and then hand it over to Xavi. So today we're going to cover, it feels like this year we've been living and breathing everything related to generative AI, chat interfaces, conversational interfaces, large language models. And so this talk is actually something that goes back, before the big Gen AI explosion. We had chatbots, funnily enough, and one of the tools in Google Cloud is Dialogflow CX, which stands for Customer Experience. And it is a very powerful tool for being able to answer customer questions and help get people to the solutions they need. So if you've ever been on a phone call with a virtual agent or a chat, you may have been through some frustrating things and it probably wasn't powered by Dialogflow CX. Press 1 for this, press 2 for that. It's very frustrating, or it's misunderstanding what you're saying. So what we're going to talk about today, or what Xavi's going to talk about and go deep on, is fundamentals of conversation AI and how we use natural language understanding and how you can use Dialogflow CX to very quickly spin up a virtual assistant and have it set up to help your end users, whether they're customers looking for support or people looking for the right product to buy, or just helping them learn about different things that you offer, right? So we see solutions in all kinds of different industries, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. At the end of that, we'll talk about Dialogflow CX CLI, which is an open source tool that Xavi developed. It's very, very cool. The tagline is the missing CLI for Dialogflow CX. Lets you do a lot of cool things for testing and interacting with your agents, as many of us developers like to do on the command line. And then we'll wrap up with some Q&A. Some of those questions have been pre-submitted, so thank you all for doing that in the registration form. You can also ask your questions in the chat space there. And so we will go through some pre-submitted questions, some chat questions. So please, if you see anything that's interesting, you have questions about, let us know. One other footnote here is that you may be wondering, where's the generative AI in this, right? We, as recently as 2 days ago, July 18th, we sent out an announcement in a blog about some new features that are GA in Gen App Builder and Dialogflow CX. You can bet that Xavi and I will be back in the next couple of months to talk all about that. We did a session a few weeks ago, Twitter space on generative AI. This talk in particular is about the fundamentals of conversation AI, the fundamentals of Dialogflow CX, open source tools like Dialogflow CX CLI. So we really don't want to forget about those fundamentals. And I hope you all will enjoy, whether you're an advanced chatbot user or new to Dialogflow, some of the things that Xavi has put together here and has lots of experience in doing himself and working with people like you all to empower you. So with that, we'll jump to the next slide. I'll hand it over to you, Xavi. Feel free to intro and drive the rest. And I'll come back and interrupt a couple of times if I see interesting things that we can talk about more. But take it away, Xavi. It's great to have you here. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris, for having me here. And yeah, just want to say hi to all the Spanish people that joined from GDG Madrid, which is like the local chapter, the World Developer Group local chapter that I am co-organizing with other people. So yeah, hello everyone. And yeah, I'm as Chris said, I'm Xavi. I'm based in Madrid. I Cloud Champion Innovator in Google Cloud Champion Innovator in the MLAI field, and with like a big focus on conversational AI. Why? Because I started like back in 2019 building voice applications for, Alexa, for Google Assistant. In Alexa, you can create apps, just voice apps called Alexa Skills, and in Google Assistant, you could create uh, the same thing called Google Actions, and now Google Actions Sunset. So yeah, since 2019, I was involved, in the assistant or conversational AI ecosystem. So yeah, that's why I started as well with Dialogflow CX. That's why I'm working at VoiceFlow as well, because VoiceFlow is a conversational AI platform. So yeah, that's pretty much my journey in terms of conversational AI. I'm also a Google Developer Library author in machine learning. So if you go to the Google Dev Library, you will find a bunch of uh, blog posts, projects, articles that I submitted, and those are all available there. You can follow me in my GitHub at Xavier, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. That's where I usually publish most of my content, and also on my blog, which is shavidop.me. Okay. As I said, I'm working a head of infrastructure at VoiceFlow. So basically, VoiceFlow conversational AI platform, kind of similar as Dialogflow CX. So yeah, let's move on. As Chris said, this event, this talk is to introduce you, to have like your first contact to Dialogflow CX, to understand, what is the conversational AI, what is Dialogflow CX, and to understand, like all these base things that you will need to keep growing, and also, to understand all the generative AI things that are coming and how to build conversations basically. So what is Dialogflow CX? Dialogflow CX is a conversational AI platform that provides a new way for designing agents or assistants, okay? Taking a state machine approach to agent design. We will see an example about, how an agent looks like, but basically, Dialogflow CX, um, if someone here like try Dialogflow ES, which is the older version, what you will miss is basically a graphic user interface that you can easily create conversations, and a state machine manager basically. So Dialogflow CX is a place, a platform where you can just create conversations by creating flows and creating blocks and transition from one block. That means one state in Dialogflow 6 is called page, to another page. And you can also transition to another flow. Okay, in Dialogflow 6, there are two main concepts that are super important, which are first the flow concept, which is a sub conversation in the whole. For instance, if you are creating a bank account assistant, a flow could be like, for instance, asking for or checking your balance, or retrieving or sending money. That could be another flow. A flow, you can see a flow as a component and can be reused. For instance, let's say that you have order bot, in terms of, like, I don't know, like a pizza order bot, and in many places there's a payment, for example, that you will need to proceed. So that payment could be in a flow, and you can reuse that flow as a component, as a reusable component, in all the conversations. Okay, so that's the main important one of the main important concepts in Dialogflow 6. And then the other one is page is within a flow. You have multiple pages. Well, that is what I said, multiple blocks. So within a flow, you can go from one page to another, from one block to another. That is why I said that it's a state machine. While, I mean, one in the past, when you were building like assistants, agents without this graphic user interface, um, you can feel that, or you could feel that this state machine management is quite complex, because you will need to create a bunch of boilerplate code, and like lines and lines and lines of code to manage the state machine if you are using another frameworks or older stack. That is how Dalo, or why Dialogflow CX is super powerful, because Dialogflow CX basically resolves all this state machine management, because it's just with the graphic user interface. It's basically it's that's it. I mean, like, you don't need any extra work to create your conversations. Okay, same as voiceflow. On voiceflow, you can also create conversation assistants in the same way, with flows, drag and drop blocks, and all the things. So it's the same concept, which is super powerful. So because you can focus on the conversation itself, which is very important, and not on the development side. Okay. So this is basically just an example. This is from the Google official Dialogflow CX documentation. So as you can see, the conversation is translated, or it tunes, in flows and pages. So you can go from this flow to this flow, and then you can go back. You can, like, it's basically a real conversation managed as a flow. Quite easy to manage, quite easy to evolve, quite easy to debug. We will see that in the platform in a bit.
Yep. One quick question, Xavi. I
Yeah.
promised you I would interrupt, and just before we get too much, very quick questions, and I'll let you move on. Two questions. On this diagram, you're showing all these different tasks or places that someone might be in during a customer call or conversation, right? Why, when you say state machine, stateful, why is that important here uh, in terms of helping the user?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. So basically, the stateful is because Dialogflow CX will save the state of every single user. So it will, like, for instance, let's say that you start an order, okay, and you stop using, or like the assistant, and you don't finish the order, the state is gonna save. So you can, once you are gonna like start the process again, instead of starting since the beginning, you can start the order since when you left, basically, because you will CX will store the all the users state in the conversation. So
I
that's
see.
that's very important.
So this is important. Like if I'm, as humans, we kind of talk back and forth, but there's a lot of complexity in that, right? So if I say, I'd like to place a new order for pizza, I'd like a pepperoni pizza, and I'm like, wait 1 second, I have to go answer the door, like go to the door, come back. I don't have to start over. Or if I've modified my order, is that
Exactly.
right? So you're kind of keeping track of all of this universe of parameters and state, like we do as humans, but in a machine, we need to tell it explicitly what to keep track of. One other quick question: if someone's going through this flow, is Dialogflow CX only for chat? Can people add voice? Like how does this work with chat
Yeah.
versus voice?
So Dialogflow CX supports multiple integrations and supports multiple channels. So we will talk about it in later on, and I will show you how you can integrate your agents or assistants. I prefer to call it assistants. I know that the concept on Dialogflow 6 is called agents, but yeah, like, you can create the conversations for multiple channels. One thing in terms of conversational design, once we have like multiple channels, it is important to know, like, what to say, like what the assistant should say depending on the channel, because it's not the same way that if we interact using chatbot than using voice, by using, for instance, a telephone call or something like that. But yeah, we can use multiple integrations and also custom integration that we will talk about it.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Perfect. So let's move on. Natural language understanding. So Dialogflow CX is powered by AI, so that's why we call conversational AI. And one of the things that it has is the natural language understanding. Dialogflow CX has, like, more AI capabilities, like speech recognition. Like, now has the generative AI, but we will talk about that in other sessions, because that is like more Dialogflow CX advanced use cases. But the NLU is something that we will need to learn, because this is how Dialogflow CX works. Okay. So what is natural language understanding? Basically, natural language understanding means that what we are gonna or Dialogflow CX, what it is gonna try to do is understand what the users is requesting. For instance, like let me put this here an example. So for instance, tell me the weather of Madrid. In this case, we can the natural language understanding is the AI process that will tell us, okay, the user is requesting us the weather, but not the weather from, like wherever, is the weather from Madrid. Okay. So in natural language understanding, how that this works is basically what we are going to have is intents and entity types. Okay. So an intent is basically a user intention. In this case, could be get weather. That is going to be the intent. Okay. And to that intent, what we are going to add is multiple utterances. Okay. An utterance basically is just an example of how a user can request that intention, that intent. For instance, tell me the weather of Madrid, or just Madrid. If we are building an assistant for the weather, that could be just Madrid, so we can know based on the assistant context system in itself of the conversation that it is requesting, that the user is requesting the weather of Madrid. So those multiple utterances are requesting the same intention, the same intent. So on the NLU, we will have that intent. And then, as you can see here, Madrid is an entity type. And once you add that entity type into an utterance, it's called parameter. Okay. And basically we can say that it's like kind of a variable, is the variable part of an utterance that can have multiple values. For instance, Madrid, Valencia, Seattle, Toronto, it can has multiple values. So that this is the main thing, utterances and entity type. And we will show you in the Dialogflow CX where you can create or you can manage these different utterances, intents, entity types, parameters. Okay. So once you are designing the natural language understanding, so basically natural language understanding is super important, because it's how the users are going to interact with your assistant. So once you are designing that, for instance, the first thing that you will need is call or design your conversation. You can use VoiceFlow, for instance, to design your conversations and to test that the conversation is valid with your end users. And then once the design is done and is approved, my suggestion is gonna be like build an NLU. So put like all the utterances, all the entities, and everything all together and train. Okay, that is when you click train. What basically CX what it's gonna do is like it will train a little model that will get all the utterances, intents, entity types, and it will train a little model using that to basically have something that that will execute and that will run within CX. Like this is completely transparent for you and also for your users. But basically, when a user interacts with with your assistant, the CX agent will understand, because will understand the user, because you click on train. Okay, it's not only just building and add utterances, like, but also you have to click on train, or you can enable the auto train. Okay, so whenever you add an utterance, train, and then whenever a user interacts with your Dialogflow CX using that new utterance, then the agent will understand the user, which is very important. And also evaluate. You can see evaluate as testing, like basically test that all the utterances and all the way that a user can interact with your assistant works. So the machine learning model works as well. Okay. This is very important. So how Dialogflow CX works end to end. Okay, I'm gonna explain you in the all the technical pieces that explains how Dialogflow CX works. This is also from the Dialogflow CX documentation, the official documentation, but here you can see that the the numbers, you know, you can see one input, two forward input, three. So that's the order of execution. So basically you have on the left the end users that are going to interact with your agent, with your CX agent. So they are going to interact with your agent as we mentioned before, using different inputs. They can use for instance like WhatsApp, like Telegram, or iMessage, or voice, like a phone call, an assistant, a voice assistant. So that is gonna be the end user on the left, okay, interacting with the Dialogflow CX. Then that input, those apps, Telegram, WhatsApp, whatever, those are client applications, okay. So that is gonna call Dialogflow CX. Dialogflow CX will get all the user interactions per session, because every user has its own session. So it will call the front end app, WhatsApp, Telegram, all of them, web chat, all of them. It will call Dialogflow, the detect intent request, okay. That is the API call, and that request will trigger, for instance, a webhook service, and that webhook service will call external APIs, will call the database, for example. So what does this mean? For instance, when we are requesting the weather of Madrid, that is the user, you know, on the left, requesting the weather of Madrid, for instance, using the front end app of WhatsApp, that will call the Dialogflow CX API to say like, tell me the weather of Madrid. That is gonna be the detect intent request, and then on internally, Dialogflow CX will detect, okay, is this user that has this session ID, and it is in this like in the conversation flow, like the state machine that we saw, it is here. So right now it is requesting for the weather, so we will need to call, for instance, a webhook. So we call the webhook, and the webhook call external API, for instance, the Aku weather one. It will the webhook will get the response, and then all the way back, the response will fly all the way back to the user. So that is why you are seeing the detect intent response, and then at the end on WhatsApp, what we will see is the weather in Madrid is XYZ, you know. So that is the whole workflow. There are different type of integrations. There are like one-click integrations that you don't need to deploy any anything like extra service, and there are like custom integrations that you will need to create to deploy extra services that we will talk about it in a bit. So yeah, that is basically how Dialogflow CX works.
That's great. I'll jump in again, Xavi, with some questions here. I think this is a great place to kind of think about how how to take a diagram like this and make it your own, right? So I think each person that's watching this live or the recording can start with this diagram and figure out what customer problem you're trying to solve, right? So your example is great. Like I want to know about the weather in Madrid. Maybe I'm calling in, and so that's a great chance to sketch out what your system will look like, and how to make this your own to solve your problem. And so I really like this. It helps us think about what we're trying to do before we start coding and before we start creating agents, right? Uh, so question, as I'm looking at this, I'm kind of zeroing in on a couple of boxes and thinking, okay, so there's voice or text or chat on the end user. The next thing you have is client application. And I think that's super important because that defines how your end users, how your customers are working with you, right? These client applications can be Dialogflow Messenger, which is kind of the built-in widget you can use. And then we have a ton of integrations for things like Twilio for SMS, Facebook Messenger, some telephony providers, right, to get this into enterprise call centers. What are like the top two or three client applications you see here in terms of being able to reach a wide audience, being able to because this seems like a very important box, right? This is where your users are actually working with you and interacting with this whole system, right, is all happening through that. So what are some common client applications you see there and how they're used?
Yeah, so the most common ones that I've seen is like everything, for instance, related to customer support. So any channel that can add customer support, for instance, WhatsApp, that is widely used in Europe for customer support. The web chat is probably, I think that is gonna be the most used integration, because it's basically the web chat integration. When once you use that, is just a snippet that you add directly to your website, and then boom, you have like the classic bubble that opens up, and you can start interacting with your assistant. And the integration, I mean, to make it happen is, I mean, less than 5 minutes. Is just get the snippet, copy the snippet in your website, and boom, assistant. So that is the most common use cases. Of course, like for instance, for e-shops, for fashion e-shops, for for clothes, they're using a lot Instagram Messenger, Facebook Messenger. That is a common use case, but yeah, I would say those three.
That's pretty cool. So it makes sense. You mentioned like retail versus support,
Yeah,
and you're kind of meeting the user where they are, right? Instead of forcing them to come to some weird system they never, it's like, oh no, just use the system you're already using, chat with us, and on the back end, like we have all this powerful NLU and things to be able to help them better, right? So
exactly,
to the user, it
exactly.
should be transparent and invisible, right? It's just like, oh, every time I contact company XYZ, it's super easy to get support, and it's because of systems like this behind the scenes.
Exactly,
Um,
and being in the user's platform, like not to
mm,
forcing them to use another platform or whatever, like being on the same apps that they are using already, which is
I
very
love it.
important.
Yeah, thanks for that. And then the client application, there's a number of built-in integrations, but you and I, most people on like, watching the stream are developers, right? So like if I just want to create my own from scratch with JavaScript, Node.js, Python, like is that something easy to do or should I just use a pre-built one?
Yeah, it's super easy to do. Like for instance, I created a bunch, but on the if you download, we are gonna talk about the CXCLI
Mhm.
in a bit, but I did a CXCLI integration, and what does it mean is that you can interact with your agent just from your terminal, from your laptop terminal. So you open a terminal and you run CXCLI dialog, and you can interact with your assistant in the front end. The client application is a terminal, so it's super easy. It's basically just, I call it like one a man in the middle. So basically is what you will need to develop is basically you have your client application and Dialogflow CX. Okay, and this service that is in the middle is basically a translator, would say, from your client application request that transforms into a Dialogflow CX request. Then Dialogflow CX responds with like the next state in the conversation, and this man in the middle transform this CX response into client application response. For instance, Telegram. You know that in Telegram you can build like entirely whole applications there, which are very very cool, like using buttons, using charts, using, it's super useful. So what you can build is that man in the middle, that having a user request and a CX response, it translates into Telegram front end interface and Dialogflow CX backend, basically.
Gotcha. That's super helpful. No, thanks for that. There's so many things that as a developer, and you have a lot of examples out too in your GitHub repo for people to check out. One more question on this diagram. I could spend so much time, but I'll get one more that I think is super interesting, top of mind for people, and then we'll carry on. Is on the rightmost part of this diagram, you have webhooks, APIs, databases. Um, that to me seems super powerful because this is where your agent or your assistant can reach out to the world, reach out to something, and get an answer and return that. Meanwhile, the user doesn't really even know that's happening. So it's happening transparently. I've personally seen a lot of this with companies use this with CRMs, right? So if somebody calls in, they give their name or number. We do a lookup and say like, who is this customer? What do we know about them? So that they don't have to start from scratch, right? And people appreciate that. It's like, oh, we recognize you calling from last time. This is you. These are the products you have. So CRMs are a big use case. You mentioned, calling out to weather APIs, right? This is all important stuff that you need to get real time, right? You can't just have it hard coded in there. And so this API, like you're basically saying anything I can reach out to for a REST API, whether it's some enterprise API or some informational thing.
Exactly.
What are the top, again, this is a very broad question, but what are the top two or three kinds of services you see people calling out to in real time to be able to return
So
information to their users?
yeah, basically, the ones that you mentioned, that is like 100%, like external APIs to fetch information of the users, external APIs to fetch information, meta information from your systems, you know, like not just the request, like trying to figure out who is a user. And another one that is quite common is another one, for instance, to fetch translations, like to fetch like um you know, like in imagine that you have the same agent for like all the locales, because Dialogflow CX supports multiple locales. You can have a webhook that you can use to retrieve the responses basically in the language that the user is interacting with, for example.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's super helpful. Thanks for that. Yeah, I encourage everyone to take this diagram, make it your own, and think about what problems you can try to solve to make your customers' lives better and easier behind the scenes. So awesome. I'll come back when you start talking about integrations, but just for the sake of time, I'll let you carry on with your example. So thanks for that
Perfect.
insights, Javi.
Perfect, Chris. So yeah, webhooks. For the webhooks, as we mentioned, is like at certain point you can specify, or you can tell Dialogflow CX to your in your conversation, like, hey, let's call this webhook. So what is a webhook? Basically, it's an endpoint that can be triggered at any time in the conversation when you specify it. The architecture recommended is basically a serverless, because you know, like these apps or these uh, endpoints, I think that they should not be up and running all the time, because as they are conversations, probably there are users that they are not online, let's say, like you don't have users online, so there's not a real need to have everything up and running always. So that's why I highly recommend using serverless. Okay, so for instance, in Google we have Google Cloud Functions, which is the serverless information. You have as well Firebase functions that you can use it as well. And then there are like different pieces that we can use as well, which is, for instance, the Google Cloud Storage to store, for instance, let's say that on our assistants we are going to present images, or we are going to present videos, let's say on our Telegram chatbot, you know, like you can present information. So in that case, you can use Google Cloud Storage. Google Cloud Logs is super important, because you can see and you can add logs to your webhook. So everything is going to be in Google Cloud Logs, so you can monitor and set up also automated monitors to ping you when something is like wrong or is not working well. Okay, for instance, like the webhook is getting a bunch of errors, you can go to Google Cloud Logs and check that how or why is this happening. And then Firebase Firestore, which is a NoSQL database from I mean in the Google Cloud. Since we are in the Dialogflow CX Google, since we are in Dialogflow CX, we are under Google Cloud. So the architecture recommended is using Google Cloud products, but you know, you can use another products, like for instance MongoDB to store information, and another types of storages, and another log solution and monitoring solutions like Sentry, or any others that are also useful, or that can work all together. You can use Google Cloud Logs and also enable Sentry, so you can have like better monitoring, or Datadog, for example. You can have better monitoring for your Dialogflow CX informations. So the SDK basically are available in. I mean, you can build the sorry. Let's go back. The backend, you can build the backend in the technologies that you want. There are some packages that you can use to get, for instance, to use the to reduce the types on your serverless functions. With it, it is gonna be make your life easier. I have one example using that in a Golang webhook, which is very, very powerful. So you don't need to like create your own types and all that stuff. You can use those SDKs, and there's an API that you can use to interact with your Dialogflow CX agent. For instance, adding a flow, modifying an utterance, adding an utterance, adding an entity type, running automated tests that we are going to talk about it in a bit. So you can use these clients SDKs to create, like or to interact with your agents using the CX API. That is basically the CX CLI, the open source project that I will explain you in a bit. That is what it uses. Basically, it's just use the CX API to create like most of the objects that you can create in Dialogflow CX, like flow, pages, test, execute, training, all these things. You can do that using the CX CLI. And the SDKs available are in JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, Golang, Java, C++, and C Sharp. Okay. At the end, it's an API. So, for instance, you are a Rust developer. That doesn't mean that we don't support you. That means that there's an API. The API is pretty well documented, so you can get the information and you can call those endpoints, because the SDKs basically are just auto generated based on the Dialogflow CX API. Okay, which is really cool. I highly encourage you to take a look to this documentation if you want to build some automations, and take a look to the CX CLI, because there are a bunch of automations there as well that we explain you in a bit.
I have
So
a fun random question, Xavi.
yeah,
On the list of languages, super quick. Personally, I love, like, we have all these different languages, client libraries, API documentation, and you can go very deep in each one. Personally, day to day, I find that I use two of them just for my own preference, and one of them, the first one's Python, and I tend to use that if I'm using like a Cloud Run or Cloud Functions, right? Something that needs to do computations, or and of course I can use all the functionality in Python to do that. There's a Dialogflow client. My second favorite is a JavaScript, TypeScript, because if I'm doing something front end, like I need that to live right next to my components, right? What are your favorite things? You have so many examples out there in different languages. What are your favorite one or two languages to use with Dialogflow?
I mean, since I started like using Golang, I am a Golang lover. Like it is wonderful. So yeah, Golang is like my first one. So that is why like all the examples that you can see on my GitHub repo is using Golang, because the performance is super good. Like everything that runs using Golang, also with Python, but Golang is like you can have like a bunch of requests, and the CPU and memory is like it maintains super low, which is pretty cool.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. No, it's good. I'd love to see which examples people are using and what they come up with. And even beyond Xavi and I, there's a list of community examples on the documentation, on the Dialogflow CX documentation, that has things in all kinds of different languages and implementations. So,
Yeah.
but great to hear. Yeah, great to hear. Even between you and I, we have 3 languages down, and we happily work with Dialogflow in those languages. So, thanks.
Yeah, so and also in the Dialogflow CX documentation, you can find community projects, community agents, community libraries. There's in the Dialogflow CX documentation at the bottom left, you will find those examples that are quite useful, like Slack integrations, like Golang webhooks, like these kind of things. You will find it. So the documentation is I mean, it's pretty well done, but just in case you want to learn more, you have the community contributions, which is really great, and also in the Google Developer Library. So yeah, this is like the flow that I usually do to build conversational AI apps. So this is, I mean, you can take it for Dialogflow CX, but you can take it for any conversational AI app that you want to build. So first is the starting point. That means like the idea, and also if the idea has like makes sense to build that in a conversational AI way. Because sometimes, like for instance, when the mobile apps, started, like all the companies and all the people say like, okay, yeah, it's cool, let's create a mobile app to to do whatever, and probably that makes no sense. So the first starting point I would say is, okay, so from our business or from our idea, let's create a conversational app that fits with business idea and makes sense for our end users. Okay, so that's the main starting point. Then designing the interaction, that is like using tools like voice flow, creating your NLU, design and validate that design with your end users. That's why it's super important to use voice flow, because voice flow is an interactive design tool, so you can uh, create a conversation and directly send a link to your end users, and the end users can test it. So that's super important. Once that is done, build, like move all the like conversation flow to Dialogflow CX, and then develop the backend. Backend is basically all the webhooks that you will need, develop them. Then unify the NLU plus the backend. So basically merge all together and finally have your final agent version, and then testing. Testing, and testing. Dialogflow CX has a bunch of testing tools, and I am adding, and the CXLI has also more testing tools that are quite useful, that we will see you in a bit. And branding. Okay, an agent should have branding to have like more, like to be more personal, basically. And then deploy to production. Dialogflow CX, you can create versions, and you can deploy those versions into different environments. One environment could be staging to test there with some beta users, and another one could be prod to test that with, to release that to production, basically. So you deploy that in multiple environments, which is very important, and it is a best practice in the software development and also in the conversational AI ecosystem. So, next thing, test your assistant agent. Okay, test your agent always, always. Whenever you make a change on your webhook, on your whatever, in your conversational AI app, always test. Okay. In Dialogflow CX, there are multiple ways of testing. The first thing that you can see here, this is, by the way, this is how Dialogflow CX looks like. I will show you this in a bit in live, but you can see these are the pages that we were talking about. This is are the all the thing is the flow. So this is called default start flow, but you can create uh, different flows, and in that flow different pages. Okay, so once you have, let's say that you want to test your conversation, there's here a button that says test agent, so you can directly test your agent as you were interacting from your end user app like WhatsApp, Telegram, or whatever. You can use that to test it. Once you have done, like that once you are done with your test, you can save it as a as a test, and then you can automatically execute those tests whenever a new version is deployed in a certain environment. Okay, you can use the CXLI as well to trigger these automated tests whenever you have made changes. Okay, so for instance, these are the automated tests that is in the Dialogflow CX console under your agent. In the manage one, the manage tab, you will see a CI/CD. Okay, that CI/CD section basically is a place that you will specify the environment. For instance, this one is called test, but you can have, as I said, staging, production, and whenever you deploy a new version to that environment, the all the tests that you have saved are gonna be executed. All the tests that you have done here and that you have saved uh, are gonna be executed there, which is pretty cool, because you are gonna make sure that everything is working fine, that everything is working as expected, like the happy path is like the end user happy path. Like when, like basically a happy path is when the user goes in the, in the flows and in the page, going until the user gets the, or reach the end goal that you have designed your conversation for. For instance, order a pizza. The happy path is when a user finally gets the pizza order, basically. So that's the happy path. So with this automated test, you can ensure that everything works fine. So that's for the automated test. And yeah, let's jump on the integration. We have talked about integrations a lot in the whole presentation, but basically these are the built-in integrations that you can use. There's the one-click telephony, which is right now there's Avaya, Box Implant, Audio Codes, and Twilio. There's another six phone gateway managed by Google Cloud that you can use it as well. And the text-based ones are the Dialogflow Messenger chat, which is the bubble that I mentioned before, Facebook Messenger, and Line. Okay, so those are the built-ins. Built-ins means that when you click on connect, it will request you, like for instance, on Facebook Messenger, the Facebook app credentials. So when you go to Facebook Messenger, to developer.facebook.com, and you create your app, and once you have that credentials and that information, you just need to link that app here when you click on connect, and that's it. You don't need to develop anything else. The integration is done, is deployed already. Same with the one-click telephony, same with Line. The Dialogflow Messenger is the code snippet that I share with you. So yeah, basically in less than 5 minutes you have an assistant or agent up and running using this built-in integration, which is very powerful. But as I mentioned before, you can create custom integrations. So those custom integrations are basically the one, the man in the middle that I mentioned. Is basically, let's say that you want to create a Telegram user, a Telegram assistant, Telegram chatbot. Is as easy as basically create this service that reads from Telegram the user request, transform that information in a Dialogflow CX request, then it reads, it makes the request, it reads the response from Dialogflow CX, parses that information into a Telegram way, and it sends the response to Telegram. So that is how you will build a custom integration, as we told before, and it's very powerful. Like this is, I would say, like this is like less than 100 of lines of code, and you will not to change this so often, because the focus here is on the conversational side, okay, on the conversational AI. So yeah, you can find examples like Slack examples, like the terminal example that I created for the CXLI, Telegram. There are a bunch of examples that you can check in the Dialogflow CX community contributions in the documentation. So yeah, this is very powerful. And let's jump directly onto the demo. The demo is gonna be like really quick, but I wanna show you how this looks like. Let me stop sharing this, and let me show you this one. Yes. Perfect. So this is how Dialogflow CX looks like. Okay, so here you can create flows. You can import flows, because, for instance, let's say that you create a flow that makes I don't know, like a PayPal payment. Okay, you can create a flow, and you can export it and share it with the community, for example, because like I always push the community, because the community is super important. So you can create reusable flows and reusable components. So for instance, when you click on the start page here, you will see different routes. Okay, the routes is basically it means that in this page, this is a state, and the route is like all the things that or at least the things that needs to be triggered to transition to another page, to another block, to another state in the conversation. So we have first, we have the default welcome intent, and then for instance, product info. So product info is basically when the product info intent is triggered, then you are gonna transition to the search information form, which is another page that is over here. Search information form, for example, okay, which is pretty cool because like it's as easy as this to create a conversation. You have one page, you have another page, and depending on the user response on the or the user request, you will transition, and that's it. Super easy to develop and to grow your conversational apps. So the intents is on the manage tab. So here is where you will find all the NLU that I explained, the intents, the entity type. So when you click on an intent, for instance, the default welcome intent, you will see all the utterances. In Dialogflow CX, they call it training phrases, but you can see here all the utterances. Okay, so when a user says like "hiya," like "hey," like "greetings," "hi there," this is the intent that is gonna be triggered. For instance, if we look at the product info, these are the parameters. Okay, parameters are entity types. So for instance, like if we go back to the tell me the weather in Madrid example, that will mean that Madrid is going to be a parameter, which is an entity type, which is entity type is basically the variable definition, and a parameter is when you use that variable in an utterance. Okay, so this is like for instance, the OC is one kind of entity type. Here we have two different parameters that are different entity types, like operator and ICI. So if we go to entity types, we will see the product information with all the synonyms. So you can have for instance, for the entity types, you can have synonyms. For instance, Philadelphia, tell me the weather of Philadelphia, but you can also say, tell me the weather of Philly. If you have a Pokemon, you can a Pokédex, you can say, tell me the information about Pikachu, but you can say also, tell me the information about the Pokemon number 25, or tell me the information about the Pokemon called Pika. So Pika 25, which is the number of Pikachu in the Pokédex, and Pikachu, those are synonyms. So you can use it here. And yeah, like you
If
have
I
also,
could, I'll jump in. Sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
Javi. Just to keep us on track in time. This is super cool. I'm going to do something a little bit out of order, which is, that's how we roll. There's three questions that came in, and I thought actually while you're showing the Dialogflow UI, like we might as well go through them. And so, first question from Omar: Can Dialogflow be used to help customers place orders over the phone? Yes. Hopefully, you saw that through our integrations. So if you go to Manage Integrations, you'll see Dialogflow CX Phone Gateway and a number of other telephony providers that you can do there. So the really cool thing is you design a flow like this, and you immediately have available a chat widget. You have voice integrations, SMS. Like you don't have to redo your agent every time you want. So one single agent can power those different channels for sure. Second question from Omar. Let's say we're doing a lookup. Does Dialogflow flag our application or our agent in some way to let it know it's trying to figure out who the customer is? So our application knows that as part of its state. Quick answer is yes. As Javi was just showing, and this is what made me think of it, when you have parameters and system entities, you can tell Dialogflow, like, I need to collect the person's name, their address, and zip code so I can ship them something. And it will actually go through that loop until we get that information, right? And then the third question from Esteban: Can two or more flows be linked together? Absolutely. Dialogflow is really powerful in how you can compose these kinds of flows. We have flow level things, we have page level things, and this lets you help users think about like anywhere they are, if they need to ask a certain question, we'll answer it, or let's steer them down a certain conversation flow very intentionally. So yes, absolutely. There's a lot of interesting interplay between parameter collection, route groups, state handlers, and these are all just jargon and Dialogflow that means let's help keep the user on the happy path, right? So absolutely. Um, for the sake of time, Javi, would you mind covering CXCLI for a minute or so?
yes,
And then we'll get to our Q&A for sure, which we have lots of great questions. So thank you for the questions
yes.
by chat. Thank you for pre-submitted. So talk about CXCLI, and then we'll jump into some Q&A,
Yeah.
and we'll
So
wrap up. Thanks.
Dialogflow Dialogflow CX CLI is basically a CLI that you can use to interact with your agents. It has also a how's it called testing frameworks and testing information that is also like important, like like CX is in the CX console. You will find a bunch of testing information and about of like automations and all that stuff, but I added like more ways of testing the Dialogflow CX in the CX CLI. So yeah, basically it's like tool that helps Dialogflow CX user test their projects and interact with them in multiple ways. That is an open source project that is under my GitHub, Dialogflow CX CLI, and the documentation you will find it in the cxcli.shabidop.me. Okay. Yeah, you can also like interact with Dialogflow CX right from your terminal, because there's a command for that called cxcli dialog. And yeah, it is available on Linux, Mac OS, and Windows in Intel chips and ARM chips. So yeah, take a look at the CLI, because yeah, it's pretty cool. And when you wanna build like automations using this tool is super powerful, because like for instance, let's say that all the utterances are coming from another platform, and you can automate this kind of import quite easy using the CXLI. Like building CI pipelines and all these things using this tool is super powerful, and it helps you to leverage your conversational AI apps in a easier way, or smoother, I would say.
Awesome. Yeah, I highly encourage you all to grab and install CXCLI. Javi has made it available in, I think, 12 different package managers, or probably more last I checked. So it's super easy to install with whatever language you're using. And I've enjoyed using it for a few different reasons. So I like using Python client, JavaScript client for Dialogflow. I like using some of our tools, like some of our unofficial tools like CXLint to check the quality of our agent. And where CXCLI is fit in for me is more of that like interactive testing. You have a really cool like NLU engine validator. You have some live speech to text speech, and you've been experimenting around with some Gen AI stuff in terms of fine tuning models and stuff. So I've enjoyed using it as just a way of getting out of the big complex flows and just trying to solve particular problems with your CLI, especially CI/CD and testing, which I think is underappreciated in the world of conversational AI, right? Uh, so very cool. Anything you want to leave us with CXCLI? Otherwise, we'll get onto the resources and we'll jump into some Q&A.
Yeah, just one thing, like stay tuned. I'm building one feature that I think is gonna be super useful. So yeah, just stay tuned.
Awesome. That's cool. So we can start your repo, watch your repo, and check out the updates there for sure. And please, contributions are welcome, and we'd love to have you try it out. It's one of the many tools in our wonderful community ecosystem of open source here, which Javi and I are both very passionate about. So very cool. So I'll leave you with some resources. And Chavi, thank you so much. We covered so many awesome topics. I'll leave you with some resources. There are so many cool ways to go from here, whether you're a new Dialogflow CX user or a seasoned person who's been with us for years. Number one, there is a Cloud Skills Boost course that's called Create Conversational AI Agents with Dialogflow CX. It actually walks through, it spins up a project in Google Cloud, and you can do this on your own, and you'll end up with an agent similar to what Javi showed on your own. You'll get a skills badge, and there's like 20 or 30 other courses that you can follow up with. On the top right, there's Google Cloud Community. This is one of Javi and I's favorite places to hang out in the community. There's an AI ML category. There's others, and any ideas you have, questions you have, it's great to, Javi and I know some things, but the community as a whole knows so much more, and people are working on things together. So that's a great place to go and chat and just explore ideas, anything related to chatbots, AI, Vertex, and so on. We also would love to have your feedback from this event. There's a link there for the GCC event feedback. Let us know what we did well, what we didn't do well, and what ideas that you want to hear from next. And then finally, we have some upcoming events, July 20th, 27th. that you can check out there, and you can check out our schedule of upcoming events there. So with that, let's jump into Q&A. I know we're getting up there in time, and so what I'll do is I want to do kind of a lightning round Q&A with you, Xavi. And I think what we'll do is I've grouped a lot of our pre-submitted questions into 4 groups. I'll take one, you take one, Xavi, I'll take one. Spend about a minute on each one, and we'll wrap it up from there. And if you have questions, please find us in the Google Developers Online Discord, find us in the Google Cloud community. We would love to keep hearing from you. So let's jump to the next slide, and I'll do this kind of rapid fire Q&A, and hopefully teach folks some interesting things. So I'll start with this one, general Dialogflow CX questions. I grouped these together. Can we adapt the solution to build voice bots? Is voice supported? What languages are supported? A second related question was, what are some popular use cases for Dialogflow? Third, are there any demos or example code? So first question, yes, you can absolutely build voice-powered bots. This is actually, there's very key APIs behind this, and one of those is, or 2 of those are speech to text and text to speech in Google Cloud. They're really good, really fast, really high accuracy. They support many languages, and you can easily plug that into a voice gateway. So you can actually follow through that course on the last slide, and you can turn on a voice integration, and within a minute, you can be talking to your agent. So I encourage you all to try it out in different languages, and that is absolutely something that Dialogflow CX supports. Popular use cases. Javi mentioned some. Retail is a big one. Anywhere that has support or a call center where you need to support thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds. We have customers where the call volume is like 20,000 calls a day, and you need some kind of system to route people to the right place, and more importantly, collect what kind of information they're asking for. What questions are they asking? How
Yeah.
can we help them better? Because this is not something you design once and walk away from. Something that's living and breathing, and you want to always be improving it for your customer experience and satisfaction. Third question, demos or example code. Absolutely. I'll find a way to capture, but the best place, I posted a link earlier to the Dialogflow CX community examples. Lots of wonderful example agents and samples there. A few of them from Xavi himself. You can check out Xavi's GitHub. You can check out the Dialogflow documentation. But yes, there are tons of demos and examples in terms of pre-built agents that people have exported that you can import. There are webhook examples that you can plug in. There are integrations. So tons of stuff out there. Highly encourage you to just search out and Dialogflow plus whatever you're trying to look for. And it's been around for 7 or 8 years, and you'll probably come across some good stuff. Next slide. Xavi, feel free to take 1 minute and rapid fire. You can answer one or all questions, but I thought this was interesting questions about quality measurements and data analytics.
Yeah, so how do you verify something like this before it goes live, so and it doesn't put a reputational risk to the organization? So basically, with Dialogflow CX, you can create, as we mentioned in this talk, like versions, environments, so you can make sure that everything is working before go into production, and like deploy something that crashes everything. How can I make sure that through a natural dialogue that the virtual agent is collecting a set of structured data? So basically, Dialogflow 6, what it does is, when you are doing like the interaction, even with voice, so that is not natural dialogue, and natural language is basically there's a speech to text. So Dialogflow CX takes that information, voice or text, and thanks to the natural language understanding, it creates the structured data that the information services can understand, basically. Of the parameters shown on the analytics dashboard in Dialogflow CX, that's something that we didn't mention, but in Dialogflow CX you have analytics that you can see how the users are interacting with your Dialogflow CX agent, and how your agent is performant. Which one should we pay most attention to regarding the quality of chatbot interactions with end users? Basically, I mean, I would say like all of them, because all the analytics are very important, because like what you will need to know is basically, at the end, understand how your users are using your agent, basically, to improve from there, like having that as a feedback and improve that for for the future. So all the analytics are important for me.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I know you're all about quality and testing, Javi, for on behalf of the
Yeah,
users. And that last one is interesting. I see three that come to mind for me are containment rate. How often are you solving a problem with somebody with your agent without having to loop in a human? Is kind of an interesting problem, right? Like if you're in a
yeah,
commodity space, that may be very high, 80, 90%. If you're in a highly technical or specialized space, that may be quite low, like 10 to 20%. And you want to track that over time, right? Sentiment is another one. You can actually track the sentiment of customers. Are they happy when they get to this point in the conversation? Are they very angry and yelling, customer agent into their phone?
yeah,
So those are good things to keep track of, and analytics in Dialogflow will keep track of that, and a lot of our users will export that to BigQuery and do all kinds of really cool analysis on like how are things improving, when are my users hitting no match situations when my agent doesn't know what to do. That's probably something I need to go back and think about so I don't leave people with inactionable responses. So thanks, Javi. Next slide. There's two more that we'll cover for Q&A. We'll wrap up and go from there. So these questions are all about Dialogflow ES, Dialogflow CX, and something called GenApp Builder. So how do I migrate old intents from ES to the new Gen AI functionality in Dialogflow CX? Is a great question. How does Dialogflow integrate with GenApp Builder? Is this a different way of using existing technology, or is there actually something new here? It's a great question. And then what are the monthly service charges? What are the costs? So in general, I will say historically we had Dialogflow ES, which is great for simple flows. Dialogflow CX is kind of the modern implementation of that can handle very complex flows, and we have customers ranging from startups that have just 10 or so calls a day to huge enterprises that have 20,000 or 100,000 calls per day coming into their call center. um, GenApp Builder, if you haven't heard of that, is a new part of Google Cloud. It's a new product in itself that supports enterprise search and conversation, and the conversation bit is actually powered by Dialogflow CX, which is why it's so important for us to know the fundamentals of Dialogflow CX and how they show up. If you're very eager to get on hold of this, you can sign up for our Trusted Tester program as part of Google Cloud, and that's part of our generative AI. You may have seen our announcements around Vertex AI, GenApp Builder, Enterprise Search, and Conversation. So if you see that GenApp Builder, it is very relevant to what Javi and I were talking about today. Is this a different way of using existing technologies, or is it something new? That is an amazing question because telephony goes back to the 1800s. So in one way, it's old technology. It's talking to each other, and Dialogflow has been around for many years. What's new here is the NLU engines are always improving. The speech to text, text to speech are always improving, and Google does that at a scale and accuracy that really no one else can. And so it's really really exciting to see like what we're doing in Google research and how that goes to Google Cloud and how that gets put into an API is super exciting to watch. So short answer is it is new technology, especially GenApp Builder. There's tons of things we didn't even get to today about LLMs and generative responses that are now in production, that are brand new. So there's lots of new things going on. Our exciting job is to take it and make the customers don't really care about what feature is new or not. They just want to have an amazing customer experience. So I
yeah,
think that's my favorite part in all this. What are the charges? There's a link to our Dialogflow CX pricing that I can drop in. Basically, it's usage based, and there's a set amount of cost per chat session, per phone call. So it's usage based. It's very easy to get started with. See if it works for you. Like there's not a big upfront cost buy-in, right? It's all usage based, and you get free credits to start with when you sign up of the Google Cloud account. We'll go to the next Q&A slide, and then we'll wrap up. So Javi, feel free to take away this integrations. Lots of text here, so I'll feel free to summarize these.
yeah,
Most of these are about, when should I use Dialogflow? I want to integrate it with Google Chat. I want to integrate it with Vertex. I want to integrate it with Google Workspace. So I took out of this kind of two things. When should I use Dialogflow? And when should I use Dialogflow with product X, whether that's a Google product or something else? Like, tell me how you select that, because I know you and I would probably use Dialogflow for everything, but there are cases where we say like, no, actually, you should use another tool for the job. So tell us a little bit about that before we wrap up.
yeah, sure. So yeah, the Google Chat, like, is that often recommended, or should I stick with a smaller solution like AppScript? How can I know to choose one over the other? So for if you want to be like, like complex conversations, what I would say is, yeah, like, let's go for, sorry, I just got a phone call. So yeah, let's go to use Dialogflow CX, because like when you are building complex conversations is when that is important. Like
Mm.
when Dialogflow CX is basically making the difference there. Sorry about that. So, what are the potential and limitations if you choose to use virtual assistant agent using Dialogflow CX with a large business knowledge base?
Yeah, yeah, I think they're kind of similar, and I think you answered the
Yeah,
question for Dialogflow CX. What advice would you give someone trying to integrate Dialogflow with Google Chat or Vertex or Google Workspace? Quick answer for me is I look for a pre-built integration. If there's not one, I look to the API docs or
yeah.
hopefully someone somewhere made an example. But what's your advice for people trying to do things in Google Chat, Google Workspace, and they just want this part to be solved by Dialogflow CX?
So yeah, like, for to answer that question, I think I would say, like, I don't know, like, for instance, first go, to the, if there's something pre-built in, for Google Chat, under the Google Workspaces, then go for it. And if not, like, trying to make your own assistant with your, because for instance, if you want to interact with your own, how I say it, like, with your own information, with your internal documentation and all these things, I would suggest to use Dialogflow 6 to interact with, for instance, models that you have developed, or deploy on Vertex, or like your fine-tune LLMs, like these kind of things. I would suggest to use Dialogflow 6, and then with the webhook interact with these kind of pieces, which is very powerful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think you and I think a lot about integrations, and we see people asking about, is there an integration for XYZ? Really, to a developer, an integration is just a mapping from API A to API B. So we
Yeah,
encourage you to just go out there, try to do something simple. So you're like trying to get it to talk with Google Workspace, try to have your chatbot instantiate a new thread or something, and just try to solve that problem. And once you do that and get it working, you can continue to add on to that. So we highly encourage you to start simple. Any integrations out there may even be out of date or more
exactly.
complicated than you need, right? So just go to one API doc page and go to the other and plug them together with your favorite language. And there's a lot of powerful things that you can do for
Yeah.
sure. So with that, we'll go. I think the next slide or the one after has the resources again, just so we can put them up for folks. If you go one more, um, it's either
Mm,
at the end or
yeah.
yes, that. Thank you. So I'll throw those up again. We already talked through them, but I just wanted to say thank you, Chavi, so much for your time today. You're a wonderful community member. I had the pleasure of meeting you actually a month ago in IO Connect Amsterdam. That was so much fun. I hope we get to work together again, meet in person. I know we're going to have a number of events, so stay tuned, you all, to the Google Cloud events here. So many exciting things going on for Dialogflow, conversational, and other areas. And for those, all of you on the call, thank you for joining. Thank you for your time. I hope that you learned something. I hope that we gave you a really strong starting point. And I want to thank you all for being awesome members of the Dialogflow community, awesome contributors. I know some of you on the call are contributors to our open source space, and we really, really appreciate it. This would be very uninteresting without end users and customers and without our community. So thank you all for being a big part of that. Chavi, any final words of wisdom or sign off you want to give to our
Yeah,
audience here?
like, log in on your Google Cloud console, open the Dialogflow CX console, and start, like, testing, playing with the platform, and yeah, it is gonna be like, when you are developing conversational AI apps, like the feedback that you get is kind of, like, instantaneous. So yeah,
Yeah,
play
it's
with
great
it.
advice. Learn by
Yeah,
doing, right? To get your hands dirty,
exactly.
play around. It's a lot of fun to see what
Exactly.
goes on behind these, and you may learn some things about why you next time you call your favorite store or you have a chat, and you may have a little bit of information like, they could probably, instead of doing this interactive voice response, they should be using an NLU engine. It's
Exactly.
really cool to think about this in the world and what makes a good customer experience, right? So again. Thank you all for your time. And thank you for the Google folks for supporting this event. And the recording will be up at the same link. Thanks so much for your questions. And we look forward to seeing you around the community at some of these resources here. And yep, thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks.
See you. Bye bye.